All right, Paul, take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, please welcome to the tea your next special guest. He's the son of a Finger Lake man in the Empire State where he rose to claim his stake in the Frisbee game. And as head bonsai in milk mode, he was always tipping them high. It's all 23 skidoo for this captain of Team Buckaroo, where the only tattoo is there is no taboo. And their famous motto, don't you know, is no matter where you are, there you throw. He's the man behind the lens, one of the biggest frisbee friends, the frisbee nutter who survived on yogurt and peanut butter, showing the Europeans how we do things this side of the pond in DDC and Discathon, and everything and anything overall thrown strong. He's the top skunk cabbage runner, the longtime overall frisbee gunner, the wonder from backstate up east, making a feast for himself as the best in the Southwest. Long and lithe and always willing to pay the tithe from Paradise Valley and the rise of the Phoenix, he's the head honcho of the Dayglow, erratic, spastic, plastic, discocratic society. And now, jamming in Roadrunner Park and having way too much fun after dark, where he's still cruising to the top of his game with Judy and Bob and Wayne, joining us tonight, resplendent in life's bounty and feeling groovy in Maricopa County, Harvey Brandt.
I don't know how to follow something like that.
That's kind of our shtick here
Yeah,
on this show.
yeah.
Is
No,
just
that's
the
cool.
intros.
That's really cool. It takes some time to do that.
I do a deep
Paul
dive.
is
So,
a true wordsmith. No two ways about it.
but thank you for joining us. This is awesome to have you on the show. This is really a special honor, a special privilege for us.
My pleasure.
Right on. Well, let's dive right in with the framework. You currently live in Phoenix, Arizona, and you're currently actively retired, according to the talk we've had recently.
Finally actively retired. 5 years after retiring.
Not very many people can say that, but we're going to get way into that in a little bit. But we have a very little bit of information. Well, I wouldn't say a little, but not a lot. But disc golf wise, your disc golf career, Statmando, according to Statmando, it says you have 189 total events, 101 caches, 159 top 10, 90 podiums, and 44 wins. And mind you, everybody, that's just disc golf. He's got a whole lot of other background behind him as well. All the overall events going back into the early 70s and everything, and we're going to cover that as well. But that's a pretty good start. 189 total events. How many off do you think that is? Because there's bound to be some things that weren't recorded.
Yeah, it's probably off, but it's hard to say. Hard to say exactly by how much, because sometimes there were little events that weren't necessarily recorded. I can think back to playing in the snow in New England for their frostbite type stuff, and those things don't get much attention or much on the stat line.
Right on. Well, one thing that's definitely a strong stat is you are the current world champion MP70 from the Masters World Championship this summer in Emporia, and you were one stroke ahead of Levon Wolf, and it was your biggest disc golf paycheck of your career. Is that correct?
Probably, yeah, I think so. Definitely, it almost paid for the trip. I mean, you go to events and you spend all this money, and you just write it off. It just sometimes it works on your taxes, sometimes it doesn't. But that one almost paid, I think, for the flight and the car and the lodging and everything like that.
Well, congratulations,
awesome.
champ. Way to go. That's cool.
Thank you.
And Levon, for a long time, he was an early guest on the show. And for a long time, his show had the highest view count of all of our other shows. So maybe you can displace him in that too by one view.
Yeah, some of us are going to follow up and go to the Greenwell and Beers. We're going to the Tim Selinsky in North Carolina and hopefully don't get rained out. And Levon I think he was maybe registered or talking about it, and then he is not going to attend. So there's a friend of his who lives out here from Alabama. He's got the Alabama hat and football shirt and everything like that. And we were playing a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Levon bailed out. Make sure you tell him it's probably because he was a little frightened. He didn't want to,
Oh.
Yeah, that's for you. That's for you, Levon. And he sent the message, and Levon wrote back immediately. He's like, "Oh yeah, definitely. I can't handle it. Levon, I've known Levon for quite a long time, and haven't seen him a lot recently until we were in Emporia. But he's a great guy. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, one of the best for sure.
Yeah, true sportsman too.
So you were also this year the first ever MP70 champion at the Memorial. And that, I mean, right there in your own backyard. That's
I
cool.
pushed and pushed. You know, their oldest age division had been 60, and some of us are just, you know, turning 70. And
70.
I was pushing for an older age division. I was hoping to get maybe a 65 at least, because there's a whole bunch of guys who would enter that in a minute. And then they gave me a 70 age division and said, "Oh, you better fill it." Gave 8 spots. We had 7 registrants. A couple guys dropped out at the end, so we ended up with 5, but you know, not bad. And then I'm really pushing hard. He's going to have a 70 age division again this year. Coming up this year, the dates have actually changed. I'm not sure how official that is yet.
19th.
Yeah, just because they're going to tear up the park. They're going to rebuild the park.
Yeah.
So we're going to have another 8 spots for the 70 plus, and I've been pumping it up with the guys in Emporia. I've been pumping it up with the guys who are turning, you know, starting to turn 70 and things like that. So it's, you know, the sport is growing from underneath, but the sport is also growing at the older age levels.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
in Emporia, I think we had
that there will be a glass trophy for your division without question.
And initially, after, you know, we had the tournament and things like that, Keith had said, Keith runs spinners at the disc golf shop. He said we didn't have a trophy, and it's like, you know, I didn't really care. I have a few extra trophies sitting around the house, anyways. And then it showed up. It was amazing. It was really beautiful.
By the way, for sure.
I can see sort of.
You have one more, and I was like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I do. And he goes, it doesn't matter. Just throw it in there. If it matches the others, we're good. And so
exactly.
So it was really my honor to join your row of trophies, because you've got a nice, you know, the gable vaulted ceiling really lends itself for your trophy. He lines his trophies all on top of his kitchen cabinet, and there's huge space for it. And it's pretty nice to be a member, you know, up there in that row.
Oh yeah.
Now, before we move on, I just want to say the Memorial has been the site for you personally as kind of a proving ground, especially as you not only age, but improve with age. Your first win as a Grandmaster came in the Memorial in 2008. Your first win as a senior Grandmaster comes in the Memorial 2015. And your first win as an MP70 comes in the Memorial 2024. So there's some great mojo there. Keep it up, whatever you're doing in this desert Southwest.
So I guess I never won the Masters division. I don't remember that. Who knows?
I can claim to doing some deep dives, but I can't claim to being comprehensive in my
I'll look,
research.
see if there's any chance that happened. But yeah, multiple divisions. Never in the Open. By the time I got out here, I was, you know, getting old enough not to really be competitive in that high level end of things on the Memorial. So pretty intense tournament.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's one thing too that a lot of people don't realize, that that's one of the most popular. I wouldn't necessarily say snowbird tournaments, but cabin fever breaker. It's a big cabin fever breaker for the folks that come from up north, because a lot of those people, like Brinster, for instance, he's down there regularly, and I haven't really talked to him much about it specifically, but I'm pretty sure that's probably the first time every year he cracks out shorts.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what the Triple Crown used to be for us. I mean, our own kind of grapefruit league kind of thing. But for those of us on the east side, you know, now that anybody on the west side would go to either Texas or to Arizona. Yeah. So we have, before we move on from the framework, we have our most important question about the PDGA number, right, Mace?
Oh yeah, well, and he and I talked about this just yesterday, but so everybody has a story. Everybody has if I had done this and if I had done that, and I already know that you do as well. So tell your PDGA story.
Well, shout out to the Rochester Frisbee Club people. When I was in school at Rochester Institute of Technology, I think I was telling you yesterday, we had a gym, and the Rochester Frisbee Club doesn't have a gym, and in Rochester, New York, it can get a little chilly. So they would all come out. Dave Marini, Michelle Marini, some class people from all the days. Jim Palmieri, I mean, he's still playing at 80 plus years. Was still running track and things like that. Jamie Molt, Doug Correa, Bill O'Dell, a bunch of people. They would come out and play at our gym. And Palmieri was one of the early promoters of the PDGA. And he's like, "Oh yeah, we got to join this organization." It's like, what organization exactly is this? Okay, Ed Hedrick's pushing it. A bunch of California and stuff like that. So while in college, I didn't have a lot of extra funds, so I wouldn't join, or just passed on joining. It's not like I wouldn't, but just passed on it. You're going to get a couple cheap Frisbees with your PDGA number on it. Okay. And then after the 77 Octet overall tournament in New Jersey, most of the people hiked up to a new golf course on a ski slope called Craigmere, New Jersey. It's not there any longer, didn't last very long. And it was a PDGA event, maybe the same weekend as they did Oak Grove in California. I'm not exactly sure, but certainly the first East Coast PDGA event.
It was the same one as Mobile.
Okay. You had to join to play.
Yeah.
So I think I was telling Brian yesterday that maybe 150 people in line joining that day. You look at the all the people in the 200s, maybe even the early 300s, and pretty much they all, Gail McCall, Jim Kenner, all these people were joining at that.
Two of our guests that we've had on here, Dave and Michelle Marini, 302 and 303. And Doug Correa was, I think, 304 or 305.
Oh, yeah, we were right in line together. I was 299. Wow. I'm 299.
Okay, so this is, again, kind of, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, but there's a void in our archives, and to me, as kind of a semi-professional historian, it offends me that there are records that are not being kept, and so your name is not preserved from that. Like when if anybody right now goes to pdj.com and types in Harvey Brandt 299, they're going to see your first ever PDJ event is 1979, not 1977. And this is huge in the historical record. At least for me, this is like, Thanos snap kind of level, awareness.
I was there. I joined. Obviously, Dave and Michelle were right there in line behind me. Probably because I wasn't much of a golfer at that point in time, so maybe there wasn't any need to keep a record of my results. I'm not sure how. There was a lot of people there, so maybe they just didn't keep everybody's stats. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good question.
But I mean, this is back, like, for anybody out there who's wondering, why is it that they're not keeping like instantaneous stats? We're dealing in the paper age. We're dealing with mail systems.
Paper age too.
Yes. It rains, the paper gets all rippled and moldy, and the ink runs. And
then post 77, that's when I graduated from college, took a job as a photographer at a small school in upstate New York, Hobart and William Smith colleges. Okay. And so I probably wasn't traveling to tournaments at that stage for a couple of years. We were playing object golf on the school campus. PDGA, baskets weren't everywhere to be had. And in Geneva, New York, we had a great little course, but all object and 141s, 150, 40 molds, 50 molds, 100 molds, all that stuff. I think that was maybe even probably before Midnight Flyers. I'm a little lost on when they exactly came out, but I think that was a little bit later.
Well, I think it started with the Night Flyers first, and then the Midnight Flyers.
Midnights, and the same thing. Night Flyers came out. It's like, what do you need those for? Didn't buy any. And so then Midnight Flyers, like, okay, I better start buying them. I did eventually get a Night Flyer for my collection, but didn't buy them initially. All the whole, 1 through 8, 1 through 9, whatever, all the numbers, passed on that.
Well, it's such a different time too, because like now everybody's like, "Oh, did you see that new disc that's out?" And I gotta get that, And back then, it's so funny how that really didn't take hold till a little bit later for everybody. They're like, "Yeah, whatever. I got 10 of those."
Well, it's like a new disc of the month club. Every time you turn around, there's a new disc or a new
Oh,
company coming out.
yeah.
I was looking through some of my old Frisbee World magazines because you said you may be interested in some photos or things like that, just to see what my photo credits were. And
Yeah.
you're looking at the list of stuff that they're selling, and they're selling the coupe, and they're selling these early AVRs and all these different discs that don't even exist anymore for the most part.
Oh yeah, when you see like the Benwall or the Super Puppy ads, you're like,
Yes.
whoa, this is Back to the Future style right here.
Yep.
So okay, so you've already kind of alluded to it, so let's just jump into your origin story. So before we get to 77 and your first ever Frisbee golf
Mm-hmm.
tournament, when did Frisbee, if you can remember, what was the first time Frisbee entered your life? Like it was in
We
the zeitgeist there, right?
we had some old blue Frisbee, likely because nobody else made things, in the drawer in the basement of sporting goods stuff. I remember it clearly. And then certainly had an old black master that when I was in high school, graduated in 72, when
Okay.
we were in high school, we would hang out in the park. We would actually do buck from what's his name, the comedian was in jail, Bill Cosby. Buck number. If you go back into some of his stand-up routines, he would do this buck. You jump on people and stuff like that, and we would toss around a black master in the park. So that was pre-72, and then took a year off before I went to school because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. Worked in a photo lab, worked on a ski slope, and then started college in 73 and started playing Ultimate in 74. So there was still some Frisbee throwing around in high school time, 71, 72, that
Sure.
era.
Nice.
The old Black Master, which, Black Masters, White Masters discs, people wouldn't even know what they are anymore. You're lucky if you can find one.
I mean, when I remember when I moved from the small town I was raised to Toronto, where I live now, that was 77, and there was a variety store up at the top of the street. It was like literally, a couple 100 feet north of where we moved. And I remember, of course, I was into candy, and they had one of those slushy machines. So of course, I'm going to go there and check it out. But as I'm looking in the window, I see there's a display for Frisbees. Like clearly, that's still a dominant memory of me from 1977, and I don't think I'm the only one who's been deeply imprinted by the kind of ubiquity of Frisbees in the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
You couldn't go anywhere without knowing, at least in North America, without knowing what a Frisbee was.
It was a toy, take to the beach, you'd have a ball and a glove and a Frisbee in the bag.
So, now you'd already said that you had gone to the very first ever, well, I guess the second ever PDGA event at Craigmere. It was a one-day event right after Octad, which means that you had gone to Octad. Had you played events before you got to Octad?
I might have played the previous Octad, maybe 76. I mean, I definitely have a shirt from 77 and was there. It was mostly Ultimate before then. Playing a lot of Ultimate road trips. We were in the Northeast, so we would have road trips to Amherst, Hampshire College, Boston. I think we took a road trip to play Cornell. A lot of those schools. I mean, you could go to a weekend, Amherst, Massachusetts, and you'd play 5-6 games. So it was a lot of Ultimate and photography of Ultimate. There's a couple Ultimate books out, and I do have some photos that I took in those books. Not a ton, but some, because I wasn't prolific, because I was trying to play and shoot at the same time. Sort of gets in the way of each other. So it was mostly Ultimate, and there weren't that many events either. Like I didn't know about any of the Rose Bowl, World Frisbee Championship things until I connected with people like Stork, Dan Roddick, and Palmieri, and hear about those things from them. When we were in college, Kirkland and Malafronte came through town doing halftime shows for the Globetrotters, and they came out to our gym and showed us stuff, spinning it, tipping it, things like that. So it was a matter of probably of exposure in the early days, in the mid 70s.
So were you in the audience? Were you in the audience when Malafronte and Kirkland were doing the whole thing?
No,
Okay.
I didn't go to the actual Globetrotter game, but they
Okay.
came out to our gym, I think, in the afternoon before their Globetrotter gig
But
in the
you got to
evening.
see them there in the
Oh yeah,
gym.
yeah. Got to
Nice.
meet Kirkland, who, he was in his prime as an athlete and frisbee player, and wouldn't really necessarily acknowledge other people who were below him, who couldn't do what he could do. He acknowledged me in 1980. Finally, actually spoke to me and complimented me. I won one of my first events in the AFDO, the American Flying Disc Open. Won the DDC title with my good friend Paul Brenner from Ithaca, New York, and we won DDC over Snapper Pearson, who was like a DDC god at the time, and
Right.
probably Sean Sheldon, one of his regular partners. And then Kirkland acknowledged that I existed because I had won. I'd won. But I did probably play, speaking of the AFDOs, I probably did play some early AFDOs, maybe 75, 76, 77, because I was there in Rochester.
Okay.
And when I mentioned the DDC, I remember playing against, I can't remember who I was playing with, maybe a guy named Ed Noble from San Diego, something like that, old school guy. But we were playing Kirkland and I think Cray Van Sickle, and they would just, beat the crap out of us. So that was probably 75, 76.
Wow.
Early days of DDC.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting to know that Jim Palmieri really was very much of a Johnny Appleseed in a lot of ways, in a lot of disc activities, and especially, I mean, DDC is kind of one of those strange Gnostic forms of disc knowledge that most people don't. They've never heard of this acronym DDC before, but it's one of the most fun games ever. And Jim Palmieri invented it in Rochester.
Yeah, and it was a bastard stepchild for a while in terms of the rules and things like that. And the NAS, North American Series tournaments in like 78, 79, I did attend a bunch of those, 80. And DDC was one of the events. And, I think we were using 119s, and the court sizes were different, and the distance between the courts were different. And it took a while to really latch on. But today, in terms of disc skills, I mean, Ultimate is a disc that flies. DDC is a disc that flies, where, in my perspective a little bit, golf is more almost a projectile event. The discs don't necessarily fly as much as they are missiles through the air, just because of the weight and the design of them. Whereas DDC takes intense disc skills just to get that disc over in the other 13-meter box, 17 meters away, and you have to play them when they're 105-gram discs, and that it takes a little while to learn that. So it's one of my favorite disc sports for sure. Probably one of the ones where I've been most successful as well.
We're going to dive into that.
It seems like most people that we interview say the same thing about DDC too. That it stands out. It seems, I mean, definitely not keeping track, but it seems to be head and shoulders above everything else.
At high levels.
Mentioning your favorite,
Yeah. So Mace, let's just jump into where Harvey appears on a historical record, which we all know has got especially back, the further back you go, the more.
Well, so we're going to jump in 2 years in 1979, because we've already talked about 77 and 78, and actually a couple years before that. But the first year on record in the PDGA database, and it shows that the only event that year you played was the New York State Frisbee Disc Championship in New York City. Do you remember that?
New York City, I guess. I'm trying to remember. I know we had one out near Buffalo in Olean, New York one time, but that might have been a little bit later. New York City, I guess. Didn't do a lot of playing in the city. I mean, I lived in New York, but when I was growing up, it's not like we would visit the city. It was 5-6 hour drive away. So you wouldn't really necessarily go to New York City for any particular reason. So not a clear memory. No.
That's okay. It was from a long time ago.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So there was a few names that were listed. Mark Dana was
Yep.
a TD. Uh, Jim Herrick won golf. Jim Paul Mary took third in golf.
Hmm.
Jamie Mold and Bill Odell took second and fourth in golf, and then
Rochester guys, yep.
yeah, and then Jamie and Bill won the NAS DDC event in Philly shortly after that, apparently in
Okay.
1979.
So you've already mentioned Jamie and Bill, and you said the
Yeah.
Rochester guys. Um, you've already said that DDC is your jam. If they won the '79 NES in Philly, were they kind of like the hot DDC guys in your area at that time?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Jamie and Bill were a great combo. Jamie was very, I'm not sure what he did prior to Frisbee, but very good overall athlete. Bill Odell was a taller, um, also very good at disc athlete, but taller, and that really helped. When you have that reach um, for playing, you can jump up and get stuff. I haven't heard much about Bill in quite a few years. I think he may be still playing in Rochester, but Jamie has showed up at a couple of events over the years that I've seen him.
Oh, cool.
Doug, I haven't seen him in a little while, but I know he's still playing a lot in Rochester. I'm sure his records are pretty up to date
Oh, Doug
in
Correa.
the East Coast. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then,
yeah.
that was the crew, Dave and Michelle
Yeah.
Marini and Jamie and Bill and Paul
Okay.
Mary and a couple other guys. I can't remember names now.
So Jim Herrick, who won that golf, he wasn't from there.
No, well, he was not a Maplewood, New Jersey guy. He was not in the birthplace of Ultimate,
Oh,
but he was a Cornell University guy. I think
okay.
he might have gotten out. He's the same age as I am. We're have birthdays the same year. There's a bunch of us who all turned 70 this year, overall players mostly. But Herrick was I think he might have even played like freshman basketball. He was that kind of athlete at Cornell. And
Oh
he
wow.
joined Ultimate Team, which was, I think, founded probably by John Cohn. And they had, all-stars. They were a team that, was a national contender pretty much every year. I mean, we went down there one time and they just beat the crap out of us. I think that was like 70, what would that have been? 74, 75. We showed up late and they just bombed. You had a guy named Toby Lou who was a speedster. Herrick was a speedster. But he was from the East Coast, Massachusetts. He was from Massachusetts. And then went to Cornell. And then I'm not sure when afterwards he played with the Boston Rude Boys, bunch of teams like that, and then moved out west. And then his career was at San Diego State University. I think he was in the athletics department, assistant or associate director of something out there at San Diego State. And I think he's finally retired now too, and getting some knee surgery, as a lot of us need at this point in time.
So 79. So obviously, just from the outside view, it looks like you started in '79, but obviously talking with you by '79, you've been fairly well inured into the Frisbee life. Enough so that when Ron Kaufman starts the International Friendship Tour, you are essentially not only part of the tour, but you are kind of the official or semi-official or unofficial tour photographer.
Yeah.
First of all, let's talk about Ron Kaufman to begin with. He's a pretty prolific guy, especially in the early days of Frisbee, and he's the founder of Discovering the World.
Yes.
Which is, I thought Dan Mangone was the only guy for.
No, Ron started it. Okay. Dan bought it later. I think Ron, was getting itchy for other stuff and sold to Dan, who's taken it to, pretty established levels, with a shop and everything like that. I think Ron was doing mostly online, mail order stuff because, Palmieri had a store for a while and was never, it was a little early, just too early for that. He had a magazine as well, a little too early for both those things.
Too early, yeah.
Yeah.
And his magazine was incredible. The production values on that magazine were off the charts.
I had a lot of photography.
Yeah.
A lot of photography in that one.
But Ron, when you open
Mhm.
a Frisbee Discworld magazine, you would see almost at least once a year international connections with Ron Kaufman, and he was kind
Yeah.
of like the go-to European guy. So tell us a little bit about who Ron Kaufman was, because most of us don't know who he was.
Um, I guess I would see him because he was on the East Coast. I would see him at tournaments and things like that. He was very into promotion. He wasn't really much of a serious player or competitor, I guess, a player, but a competitor. But he was more into the organizational part of things, selling the discs, getting events, and he ran, like I said, like you were saying, he ran some tours. And for some reason, I joined up with one of them, which is where I met, some of the early people. Mountain, guy named Mountain, um, Kerry Colmar, uh, J. Gary Dropko from Pittsburgh. He was on that tour, and a buddy of
Really?
his. Yes, Jay
Wow.
Gary was on that trip, and Tita
Wow.
Ugaldi
Wow.
from California
And
was on that trip.
wasn't Laura Engel also? Was it?
I think she was overseas with, what was his name? I
Oh,
can't remember
she
now.
was overseas already at the time on her
I
own
think so.
tour,
She
wasn't
was
she?
not
Yeah.
in that
Okay.
group tour. It was
With
like
Jens, wasn't she?
maybe, or what was her boyfriend's name? Another guy, but she might have been doing shows with Jens. But I think we
Okay.
ran across them in England or Belgium. But Tita, Jay Gary, what was his buddy's name? Can't remember. Kerry Colmar, Mountain. I think that was our crew that we went and we met. The guy in Belgium who ran a lot of things. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. We spent some time in England. Um, a lot of just going around and playing. I don't know if we did that many tournaments, but
No.
we were certainly
I mean,
traveling around a
I think
bunch.
there was only the one, the European Open in Richmond. But before we get there, first of all, in Frisbee World Magazine, they say noted photographer, winner of the '78 photo contest. Do you remember what that winning photo was? Because I've gone back to look at that spread, and I couldn't find any.
From Frisbee World, was
Yeah.
it? Or I couldn't tell
Sorry,
you.
I don't mean to put you
Yeah,
on your spot, and
yeah, that's a good
I've been
question.
living in the '70s for the last week already, so I'm just in this. But this was just something that came to me. I was like,
It
oh,
was
well,
in
as soon as they say,
'78. It
that's
was
what
in
they said,
'78.
that you were the photo contest winner.
Okay.
But here's the other thing: is I want to ask you, did you ever get paid for any of the photos that you submitted to Frisbee World Magazine?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Stork might have thrown me a few bones every once in a while. I think it was '79, not '80, because I think I qualified for the World Championships in '80. But '79, he gave me an opportunity to come out, not as a competitor, but as a photographer for
Okay.
the for the Rose Bowl World Championships. Um, so
Oh,
I
that's
think he
cool.
either put me up, or I don't know if he paid for my flight or something like that. Um,
Okay.
but it was
That's
through
great.
the connection of Ultimate and Palmieri, and you know his Rutgers team
Okay.
coming through and beating the hell out of us on a parking lot in April in the mud and the snow. 38-2, I think it was the score. In their charter bus, and they were cool. Um, but that was my connection with Stork, and I would
Okay.
send photos in, mail them in, because that's what you did back then. You mailed them
Right.
in. You couldn't scan them or anything like that. And I think Frisbee World came out every 2 months,
Yes.
approximately.
At the
Um,
beginning, like midway through its publication history, it switched to every 3 months, but there were
yeah, so
six issues a year for the first couple of
the
years.
few issues that I had sitting around, I couldn't find the Palmieri magazines. I don't know where I put them,
Okay.
um, just to review stuff. But I was looking through the older magazines, and I don't have the one that has the you know photographer of the year. I'm trying to remember what that might have been. It might have been a
Okay.
shot of Stork doing something. That's a good question. What was that?
I just have to make sure that I give a shout
Yeah.
out to flyingdiscmuseum.com,
Oh
because they
yeah.
are the ones who do a lot of amazing historical and archival you know work. And I've used their site many times. You can go there and you can see old magazines. So they've digitized
Yep.
the Frisbee World magazine. You can see that. You can see
Okay.
some original Harvey Brandt credit photos from there.
Oh, I'll have to look that out because I was just playing golf with Mike Hughes this morning.
Okay.
We have a little Tuesday morning league, so we were just playing. And I've known him since I moved here in '90. He was like one of the movers and shakers out here in Arizona when I moved here in 1990. I think he ran the '90 PDGA Worlds here, in which I
Oh,
did
nice.
not compete. You know, I had a new job. I couldn't take a week off to play in a frisbee tournament in October, so I
Well,
missed my hometown tournament. And then,
since
but
you're
yeah,
on that,
Mike's back playing again. I got to get on this stick and digitize some of the stuff that I have sitting around in my house to submit to the Flying Disc Museum. I promised him, and it's just been a little crazy. The year's been a little crazy. My wife had a couple surgeries, so you know, stuff gets pushed on the back burner.
Totally.
It's even good that I'm able to go. You know, went to Emporia, took the time off, I'm actually going to a DDC tournament in Fredericksburg, Virginia, flying out Thursday, play that this weekend, and then go down to Raleigh for the Tim Selinsky.
Sweet.
that sounds like a great trip.
Oh, yeah. Except for the rain that's forecast for Raleigh right now.
Well, maybe you'll get skipped out of part of that, but
It might move through by the time we get to the serious, you know, the practice days look a little marginal, but you know, I got friends there, hang out, do whatever, hopefully get out on the courses. It's been a long time since I played in Raleigh, so I have to reacquaint myself with
Nice.
those courses.
So,
oh, go ahead, Mace.
all right. Well, it looks like we've covered the friendship tour pretty well, but
It's a good time.
It sounds like a great time, and you went to so many cool places. I mean, I don't know. I've just started sticking my foot off in the water in Europe, and in terms of just wandering, and it's, oh man, my list is so unchecked in that department. You know, just so few checks. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But one thing that we've heard from a lot of people about, and we're curious, were you a participant in the Smithsonian Frisbee Days?
Oh yeah, a lot. Larry Schindel, who had moved to Washington D.C., he was the founder of the Ultimate Frisbee team at Rochester Institute of Technology, where I went to school, and that was my connection with Larry. And then he graduated, if he was a few years ahead of me, as a printer, went down to D.C. and got the Smithsonian started. So I was there frequently as helping with the photography, but frequently, or maybe more frequently, as a demonstrator, a participant in freestyle, distance, MTA, you know, different events like that. I have a lot of the shirts, I have a lot of the discs. We even ran a mixed pairs, male female DDC tournament as part of the weekend.
Wow.
So we were tying a lot of things, and that was a great event because there'd be, you know, thousands of people on the Washington Mall. So yeah, I was in the Smithsonian festival a lot.
This is what is always striking me curiosity wise. So it starts in '77 at the kind of the height, the apogee of the frisbee zeitgeist phenomena, thanks to Whammo. But it still continues on into the '80s after Whammo is sold.
Yes.
And frisbee is still strong enough of a kind of cultural momentum that it's still going forward. Do you remember the last year that it was actually held, or the last year that you participated in?
I probably went a good 4 years at least, but I don't remember the last year it happened. It wound down after, you know, its heyday of 3 or 4 years. It started winding down, but I don't remember the specific year that it ceased to exist.
Because when we had Scott on last week, I was looking at some video of the Smithsonian Days, and I had video from either '86 or '87, and there was still, it looked like 5,000-10,000 people packed into that space watching it. As a demonstrator, as a participator in the demonstration of events, that must have been an amazing high to be in front of that many people.
It was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And you were on, you know, you had to be on point. You had to, you know, okay, I'm going to throw an MTA. Let's make sure you throw something that you can, you know, get up there for a few seconds and still go catch it too. You know, you don't want to like just flail and oh yeah, that's MTA. We're recording the time that it's in the air, and oops, that's just a that's
That
just a
was the lake on
throwaway.
the mall.
Or distance was pretty easy because you could chuck it, maybe 100 yards or whatever, and people be impressed. Same thing with freestyle. You wanted to do stuff that you could show that you can do a trick and catch the disc.
Freestyle is amazing to watch, but even more amazing when they catch it.
Yeah, yeah. And today's freestylers are just doing stuff that I have no idea what they're doing. No idea. It's like, okay, what did he just do? Turning it over, changing the spin, doing this thing. It's nuts to watch that stuff.
Well, and at the time, well, it really, honestly, it's kind of timeless. That place, the whole area around there, the mall, and all of that kind of stuff. Like that place is pretty spectacular in itself.
Yeah.
On any given Tuesday, and it's then to have the opportunity to play frisbee there and like do it multiple years in a row. I mean that's pretty epic. It's and it's just another example of how really amazing and great things were in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of seemed like there was a point where all that momentum kind of got lost, unfortunately.
And I think some of the problem with the Smithsonian Festival itself is, I believe, some of the space where they held things was starting to go under construction for different buildings, museums or
memorials,
whatever. So I think that hurt having the space available. Sure. I think that's one of the things that happened.
But as a photographer, and we're going to talk about this later because we got a lot of your frisbee career to talk about, but we'll never forget the fact that you've taken some amazing photography. As a photographer, that is one of those like real money shot moments, having 1,000, 5,000, maybe even 10,000 frisbees all in the air at one time.
Yeah.
Because that always didn't make the cover on the Frisbee World magazine, but it was like if they had a real centerfold other than just a freestyler jumping up higher, that should have been it. And whenever they had photos on their spread of the Smithsonian Days, you always look for that. Like how many frisbees can you count in the air?
Oh, and people would be going, "Oh, I think I can see my disc. I think I can see my." They'd be scanning the photograph, especially if it was in colors. Like, yeah, I threw a green something or other, fastback or something like that.
So we're just going to skip ahead a little bit
like
here.
Finding your hat after graduation.
There you go.
Them in the air.
We're going to jump into 1980, and even though the PDJ database only records one event, which was a big payout for you. You took second in the North Conway, New Hampshire event. We want to really focus on freestyle because this is the year in 1980. This is your first finals appearance, and it happens at the Central Pennsylvania Frisbee Festival. You've had 54 total finals appearances, at least according to the Freestyle Players Association.com. And you've had great success in freestyle. You've had early days, I know in some of the early World Frisbee Championships, you didn't play freestyle, and this is going to be one of those questions that I asterisk and say, why didn't you log freestyle then when you were already playing? But in 1980, at the Central Pennsylvania Frisbee Festival, we know the kind of the dominating the landscape of freestyle. You've got the Velasquez brothers, Jensen Irwin. You've got Scott Zimmerman. You've got Craig Van Sickle and the Call Radicals. How would you have thought about yourself in that field at that time? And who were they the top names, or were there other names that were missing?
That was a lot of the top names. I'd be in the rookie category for sure. My freestyle abilities were growing at that point in time from a real base level. But the Velasquez brothers were super hot at that point in time. I'm trying to remember, the arc of the Coloradicals when they really burst on the scene. But there were a lot of the New York City jammers, Joey Hudaquin, a lot of players like that. And then certainly some of the Californians as well in the 80s. Trying to remember how early some of those guys, Crazy John Brooks, Skipper Bro Bell, Skippy Jammer, how early some of those guys were making their way onto the national scene as opposed to just more regional, like being more in California.
Sure.
But I know some of those early years, 79, 80, when I was at the Rose Bowl, you'd have the Velasquez brothers were super hot. Kirkland was still a hot player at that point in time. Cray, like I said, the New York City guys, who are still, every Thursday night they're out there in the Sheep's Meadow playing.
Wow.
And then a lot of Californians who have sort of come and gone. A lot of the names I'm not really remembering too clearly, but there were a lot of incredible Californian freestylers that, it's hard to say what's happened to all of them.
Right.
And in any part of the sport too. I was talking, I think, to Brian the other day or somebody else that, I'm 299 PDJ, and then I looked at active members in numbers below me, and there were maybe 35 active members with numbers lower than mine. And again, some of it is people have died, people have moved on, people have just stopped playing. We're close to 300,000 members, and how many of them are actually active members?
Yeah,
So
totally.
good question.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
it. Definitely gets thinner towards the bottom, unfortunately.
But yeah, in the early '80s, I was just a real rookie-ish freestyler.
Now, before we move on, and this is going to be this section that Maze is going to ask you about is really fun, but just want to ask you about Cray. His name's come up many times. We talked to Scott when Scott was just coming onto the scene. He was patterning his basically what he was the target he was achieving was what Cray had already achieved. Cray had won the world championships in 78. Scott came in and won 79 and then won for the next 4 years, which is amazing. But Cray kind of disappeared, but he seemed to be one of the more artistic, one of
Yes.
the more kind of bohemian, cultured, like a real different free frisbee spirit on the scheme. And we're hoping to get him on, but could you maybe talk a bit more about Cray specifically?
I never knew him real well because he was, higher in the food chain at that point in time. When I went to some events out in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, indoor stuff in the late '70s, I think, when I was in college, and he was a top player at that point in time. But he would do some traveling, but he was mostly, a New York City guy. And his father was a player as well, and definitely in the bohemian, what you would call a bohemian sort of lifestyle. But yeah, his style and way of going about freestyle was more flow oriented and more. I don't want to say theatrical because that's not, but more the artistic
Choreographed.
end of thing, choreographed and artistic, and not necessarily going for the leaping crazy. I'm doing a somersault in the air, crazy physical, but more the stylistic. But I never really knew him that well. Probably knew him on a name basis, but we didn't run in the same circles or anything like that. So, but yeah, he was a definitely. I hate to use the word influencer, but he was someone who had a huge influence on the early days of freestyle.
Sure.
From what I saw.
That's pretty amazing. That's definitely someone I've never gotten a chance to meet yet. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could get him on, because his outlook on what things were happening in those early days. And I haven't seen him at other events. There's frisbee events on the East Coast that include freestyle, but he hasn't shown up at them. Virginia State overall championships is one of them, but I don't know that I've ever seen him there. A lot of New York City guys come down, so I'm not sure what his activity level is. He might have moved on to other things.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a Lost Weekender next year.
There you go, the Lost Weekend.
Right.
Laszlo's
So,
Weenie World. I almost wore my Laszlo's hat, but it's a little beat up. It wouldn't look too good.
That's on our script to ask you about that.
well, here's another place where Paul did a little digging, and he's found out that you've played with a lot of Ricks over the years.
Oh,
Played
probably.
played with Rick Williams. You won the 1993 New Hampshire New Hampshire States with him, and then you played with Rick Sater, and you won the
Oh yeah.
'94 Tennessee States with him, and then of course Rick LeBeau. So who was the most fun amongst those Ricks?
Uh, Probably Rick Sater. Rick
Okay.
Sater's and he's eased out of the sport a lot. He's not really playing that much anymore. He's in a plays trumpet in a big band. They do some touring. Um,
Nice.
he doesn't compete as much, but he was an awesome freestyler, good overall player. I think he might have won uh, MTA at Virginia State,
Mm,
DDC. Rick Williams he's one of those another guys who turned 70 the same year I do. Herrick, Rick Williams, Clifftown, with Skippy
okay.
Jammer even, but
Wow.
and Rick LeBeau he's a great guy. He's not the in competition. He's not the fun aspect. He gets down and gets hard. We want to be successful, so it's not like you're there to have a party. Um, and
Right.
and and but yeah, I've had success with all three of them. Um,
Okay.
I don't think I ever played with, probably never freestyled with Rick Castilla, one of the
Mm.
Coloradicals. I don't know that I ever
Put that
competed
on the
with
bucket
him.
list.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever competed with him. But they were all very different. Rick LeBeau took his freestyle game to a different level when he was playing a lot with Juliana Corver. Um, he was always just a solid overall freestyler, not top of the line, but his game has really accelerated. Um,
Wow.
I'm not sure how much he's active in it right now, but he's still playing a lot of DDC. Still great athlete too. He's one of those guys who can come out and physically do just about anything.
Well, and
Wow.
along with what you're saying there too, Juliana's freestyle game took him a meteoric rise. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
Yeah.
she and Rick were playing all the time,
she's off the chain with all that and
and it was
everything.
Southern California, so you had all those other people, Amy Becken and the Schiller and all the people, Dave Murphy. I mean, talk about the freestyle hotbed. That's San
Who's
Diego.
who, right?
Well,
Yeah,
and when you think about all the other disciplines, freestyle is the one that really depends most on having a fraternity or a colleague of individuals around you.
yeah,
You can play golf on your own, you can practice your own thing, and you can learn by video. But it's only that synchronicity with freestyle that you
yeah,
get better.
yep. Very true.
Well,
Because you'll
so
see
talk
different
about the
people,
add-ons.
different styles. Yeah, go ahead.
Talk about the add-ons that came along, like silicone spray, fake nails, Montalvo sticks,
We
and
used to
thimbles.
we used to buy 61 or 60 mold Super Pros, and even once we started using the Whammo 165s, and the lettering would be on the inside of the underside of in the flight plate, and we would get a razor blade and shave the letters off to present a smooth surface. And there'd be times where you'd like slightly break open a package of a Super Pro to see if it was a 60 or a 61 mold, because I can't remember which was better, 61 mold maybe. And then you'd have to shave the letters off. I don't think I ever used a thimble, but once nails started becoming more prevalent, was definitely using fake nails and certainly silicone. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
was looking for the best silicone they could get, how that would work. And
Well, from what
it's
I
hard because
understand,
you put those nails on and you can't really golf with them because they just don't fit in the rim real well.
actually, this it fits in nicely. One of the things we overlooked in a previous section here of the script was the bone and pain grip. And we had Bill Wright on the show, and he said the only time he ever used the monoplane grip was when he was playing disc golf in order to preserve his nails for freestyle.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. That would make sense. That would make sense. No, I never was I could never, either my hands were too small or just didn't work for me. Never used the Bonapane grip, a power grip, but not the Bonapane grip.
So
Interesting. No
the,
monoplane grip in your game at all.
the
No.
Montalvo stick and thimbles, for those who don't know this, Jose Montalvo, one of the early freestyler and frisbee players, he had devised this thing. Basically, it was like a prosthetic that attached on the end of the finger, and it was a little
Like a
straw
swizzle stick
almost.
almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a swizzle stick that you could do that on. And I remember reading an article in Frisbee Discworld about Stork was talking about he prefers thimbles. Instead of an extra stick on top, you just put a thimble on as the same action. The whole landscape must have changed when Discraft released the Sky Styler and there was nothing on underneath.
Yeah,
You didn't
I was
have
there
to.
at actually Palmieri's house. It was a Christmas party, and Jim and Gail came, and it's like, "Hey, here's our new disc." And it's
Merry
Rochester, New York at Christmas. It's 20 degrees, and we're taking those Sky Stylers out, and we are kicking them. We are beating them on our knee. We're outdoors, just beating the crap out of them, and they wouldn't break. And that was a huge step for freestyle because the Whammo plastic, either the flight plate was thinner or their plastic use was a little different. And those things, you would go through 165s like crazy, freestyling, toe tip or, a quick under the leg tip or something like that. And you'd be smashing discs all the time. But the Sky Styler was a huge, one of the technological breakthroughs in frisbee. Maybe not necessarily more so than nails and silicone, but right up there with those. And I think I remember hearing that they maybe stopped production of the Sky Styler. I'm not sure.
I bought one earlier this year in Phoenix, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was under production.
Right. Yeah, there may be enough stock because they're heavy into golf, they're heavy into ultimate, but there's a lot of freestyle going on. So maybe someone's going to pick up the mantle and make a new disc. Or
well, if Jim Kenner wants to maintain his status as patron saint of flying disc sports, he needs to keep in all of those dimensions, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that he's not looking to lose that status.
No.
So here's a few rapid fire questions that Paul included in the script this week. What's your favorite name for a move
in freestyle?
Bad attitude, maybe. Obviously, carry that a little farther, pulling up the roots. Some of the other things I don't know or can't do them, but I have pulled up the roots in competition, done the bad attitude. Scarecrow is always a good one too, because that's something you can just flash out on the golf course. It's like, okay, you just whip it up and do a scarecrow. So it's pretty fun. I can't even remember some of the other names of stuff. There's so many different things, and someone will say some sort of move, and I'm going, "What is that? What are you talking about?"
We need a visual dictionary for sure.
Yeah.
What kind of music did you like to listen to and or groove to while you were working your routines?
I used to play to a lot of U2 stuff. What else did we play to? Some of the Call, was it the Call or the Cure? Talking Heads, obviously, that was a big one in the 80s. Loved a lot of Talking Head stuff.
I know.
So that was the big names.
I watched the video with you and Nick Hart and John Houck in the 1990 U.S. Open Finals, and you were doing the moves to Abacab by Genesis. And I thought,
okay, yeah,
that's a great pick right there.
Yeah,
that's a great song too.
There's another old names, Nick and John Houck. Yeah, John's great
Right.
freestyler. Nick was a great, met him in Florida when I lived there briefly, and great players. And Hauk's still, extremely active in course design. I'm not
Yeah, without a doubt.
sure how much Nick is playing.
We
I
actually
know he's,
had John Hauk on a previous show, and we had Tammy Pelicane,
yeah.
and Nick was on the show with Tammy,
Oh
kind of
yeah,
helping her
yeah,
out. So it
yeah.
was
They
kind
were
of two for one for
they
us.
were like a secret relationship when I lived in Florida. They weren't
Oh,
necessarily announced that they were together, but it turns out they later we learned, yeah, they were. But
Yeah, that's cool. Tammy doesn't live too far from me, so I run into her from time to time. But
yeah, supposedly she
actually,
was going to be out here in Phoenix, but then I never got any details. So I'll definitely run across her at some point.
so let's see. What was your favorite routine that you performed?
It might have been just because it was such a gas. It might have been uh, U.S. Open, um, probably U.S. Open, with Dan Stork Roddick and Kenny. He was a footbagger, world champion footbagger. I'm trying to remember his name. Ah, crap. We could also freestyle, and it was Stork's 40th birthday that day, and it
nice.
was it was random music, and they put on the Beatles. I Hear It's Your Birthday,
Of
and
course.
we were during the routine near dropless. There was one disc that sort of skipped off the ground, but we continued with the disc and completed the move. So technically, if you were judging, you'd call it a drop. But near dropless, and then we line up for like a three-person flamingo catch where Stork reaches under all the legs for the flamingo, and he did not catch it. It, it it
Oh,
bounced off his fingertips. So it was almost a dropless routine on his birthday to
Wow.
the Beatles. I Hear It's Your Birthday. So that's one of my favorite routines.
well,
That
isn't
was a
that a
great
little
one.
bit like up tempo and kind of herky jerky
A little bit, yeah, yeah.
freestyle?
I mean, that was when you didn't always get to choose your own music. It was random music because they'd be back and forth putting on,
Oh,
or
okay.
two
So they
teams
would
would
just
be
pick
Wow.
it for
playing,
you.
or two sets of people were playing, or two sets of judges and things like that. And so, and the worst case scenario was if you ever got the song Rock Lobster, because that was just frantic,
Then
crazy
you go
music.
down, down,
Yeah,
down.
yeah. But that birthday routine, and I'm sure Stork still remembers it. Um, and a couple other. I think I made the finals at the U.S. Open one time with Donnie Wallace and Jim Herrick, and I was living out there briefly, and we worked on a routine, and it was great to be able to put together something and then execute it to the whatever music we were playing. So, yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's any others that stick out. A couple of Virginia State routines where you're dead at the end of the weekend because you've been playing 15 games of DDC on Friday, and then golf and MTA and distance on Saturday, and then you come up and it's the finals of freestyle, and you're barely able to walk, and then all of a sudden sometimes the magic just happens. You just turn on the music, and everything you do is, you're hitting everything. You don't even know what you're doing. I think Rick Sater was involved in one of those one time, where we were on, and when that happens, it's really pretty special.
Absolutely. That's yeah.
And
So
a
talk
shout out
about
to my good buddy Thomas Lasher, from Detroit. He was the guy I toured all over the country with when I was doing demos, school demos.
okay.
Met him through that. He was the best man at my wedding,
Oh,
and we had, and he could every once in a while when he was on, he would just, he was one of the top freestylers. He's had some heart surgery since then, so he's not playing as much anymore. But he was one of my connections to Discraft too. We would be
okay.
doing our shows, and we'd stop in at this little shack that Jim and Gail had, and buy Sky Stylers to take on the road with us, because we'd run through them, or we'd sell them or something like that. So
Okay, so this
we had some killer routines.
this is actually part of our script here, talking about the Discraft Flying Aces.
Mm-hmm.
85 to 89, this was going around and doing at least 100 shows a year,
Yeah.
doing sometimes, middle school auditoriums and sometimes pre or, halftime game shows. Um, Most of this was happening in the Midwest.
Yes.
And so some of the people that you do this with were Dave Jewell, Brian Hayes, and Steve Jennings.
Yes.
And quote from the media says that it's the best blend of fast-paced, highly entertaining athletics mixed with upbeat, motivational, emotional, and anti-drug messages. Some of the people said it was the best assembly they've ever seen. You must have been going from those must have been highs leaving those auditoriums,
Oh yeah, yeah.
even though there was like a couple hundred kids.
And that was the early genesis of my freestyle ability, because I couldn't really freestyle much out of a paper bag. I was transitioning in jobs, and Stork put in a good word for me with John Connolly and the Aces out of Chicago. That was Jose Montalvo, and I my first gigs were with a guy named Tom Wingo out of Texas. I'm not even sure where he is or what he's doing or anything like that.
I've heard that name, but I couldn't tell you either.
Great golfer. We would be doing shows. My car, we'd be driving around, and two to three shows a day, 5 days a week. Elementary, high school, middle schools. Occasionally there'd be a college gig. That was with the Aces, and then there was a different crew. That was John Connolly out of Chicago, and then Flying Aces. That was Brian out of the Detroit area.
Okay.
And then I even did shows with a woman named Jane Kovacs, who was doing demos with, what's his name? One of the early world champions, Blurm.
Peter Blurm.
Peter Blurm. And then we were sponsored by Sunkist. So we were doing state fairs, did the Alaska State Fair.
Wow.
Flew from Alaska to Hawaii. This was with Thomas Lasher. We did shows all over, a lot of state fairs. And with that Sunkist sponsorship, I even did demos in Saudi Arabia for the Aramco Oil Company.
Wow.
So a couple different groups. And then it was with Dave Jewell that I was doing shows. That's when I was traveling and had the car accident. I was doing shows with Dave at that point in time, out of this place in Wisconsin. And sadly, that's a sad note. Dave passed away this year. I'm not sure if you guys were aware of that, but I think he was about my age. But he was an awesome freestyler out of Wisconsin, and he has since passed away. That was pretty sad to hear.
Wow, that is really.
So
sad.
yeah, a lot of different partners over the years, and that. When you're doing Frisbee every day, that takes your freestyle game. You're shooting, 3/4 length upside down throws to the basketball hoop and stuff like that, skipping stuff off the ground and getting kids out of the audience to do crowd participation. And, that was my, intro really to becoming a teacher eventually, was all that stuff with kids and shows.
That's
but
cool.
that was a development of my abilities, was definitely through the shows. And John Connolly, like I said, on Stork's recommendation, gave me a shot to do that. Who knows where I would have been otherwise?
Well,
that's
Stork
really...
is.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say Stork is so absolutely central to the entire history of flying disc sports. And, to every one of our guests, Stork has had, he's made that kind of dungeon masters kind of jump into the game kind of mode where like the god comes out of the sky and does something for you,
There's a photo in one of the magazines, must have been 79 or 80, from the World Frisbee Championships out at La Mirada in California. And it's a photo of a table with a bunch of people sitting along the side, and Stork's like at the end of the table. Whatever he was doing, he was demonstrating something, but his hands were up like this, and I think he had a beard and things like that. And it was almost like, it's him parting the waters, or him talking to his disciples.
The Last
That was
Supper.
one of my favorite photos. I can't
I think
remember
that
where
was the
that appeared.
caption on that photo was the Last Supper.
Something like that. Yeah, that
First
was
of
a
all,
great one.
where did Stork get the energy to be there on the field with all the competitors all day long and then do all of the, because okay, so now we're going to just transition easily into your first experience, the World Frisbee Championships, and it was a sun-soaked week of amazing, you know,
Mhm.
frenetic activity, and you're always getting bussed from place to place. Stork is the center, the pillar before and after the alpha and the omega, the above and the beyond, and he's up late at night in order to crank out these newsletters that are
Yeah,
internal
yeah.
to the tournament, so that when you wake up as a player after partying all night long, you wake up and you've got a fresh sheet of new information
Hmm.
that Stork
Hmm.
has put together, and he's maybe got 2 hours sleep, and I don't know how he does it each night.
And he had a good staff of people too. I think Al Bonapane was working with him, Tom Baudet,
Yeah.
um, Amy. There was a woman named Amy, a couple other people, Whammo's staff, Danny McGinnis, who I think is in Texas now. Um, so he did have some help. It wasn't just him, but he had to coordinate it all. He had to be the one taking charge of everything and telling people what to do, to delegate.
Yeah.
And I think he was a pretty good delegator, and then he had, the location, La Mirada, the facilities there were just tailor-made for an overall tournament. Um, the space is available,
That's
but
such a
and
versatile
then make
part.
sure everybody's setting up accuracy targets. Everybody's setting up DDC courts, because you
Yeah.
have hundreds of
Oh,
players.
the attention to the detail is just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
So your first experience is 1981. You get to go out there. You qualified on the NAS, and they fly you out there. What's You're still living in New York at the time. What's your experience
Probably, yeah.
of the golden California sun and the center of the Frisbee universe? Do you remember your first impressions at the time?
Not much, no,
Okay.
to be honest. I was still a pretty much newbie
Sure.
in a lot of ways, um, in terms of being competitive in a lot of the events, or having a lot of experience in a lot of the events. So,
Just for the record, for anybody out there paying attention, you didn't compete in freestyle. You did play DDC distance.
why didn't I
According to the
compete in
PDGA, well,
freestyle?
this is according to Frisbee World
Yeah.
Magazine.
Okay.
According to the PDGA, you came 25th, but in self-caught flight, you did well. And I think self-caught flight, I think either in 81 or 82, you are the 82, you're the world
82, I was a world
champion.
champion. Yeah.
So tell us, did you have any specific tips or techniques that made you such a standout self-caught flight player?
Um, well, I've been, playing ultimate. I was a runner. Um, that was a big part of it, because you can have a great throw, but if you can't run it down,
Okay.
doesn't do you any good. The plastic had good plastic at that point. The old, probably the old green FB3 fastbacks, Christmas discs. If anybody knows the old school discs, those were great MTA and TRC discs, and it was just getting through each level of the competition. The prelims, just moving on, moving on, moving on. And actually, we in '82 there was a tie, because the scorekeeping today, they take your MTA time and they multiply it by 5.5, and they add it to your TRC distance. So you get a score of, let's say you get a 10-second MTA, 55 points, and you get a 45-meter TRC, get 100 points. That's how you rank it. Back then, let's say there was 10 people throwing it at once. You'd rank you could be meters ahead of the next guy, but it was first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. So you'd get like 1 point for first, and the other guy would get 2 points, even if you beat him by a million miles. And then they add those two together, the rankings, and we ended up with a tie in the finals. A guy from Austria, I've forgotten his name.
We have it right here. It's Manfred
Manfred.
Godrich.
Okay. Yes, Godrich. I don't remember. Never saw him again. But you had a head-to-head playoff, and it was just a matter of winning that head-to-head. But
and
I
from
was
what I
running a lot. I was
yeah.
throwing a lot. It was just being in the right place, at the right time.
Well, speaking of running and throwing, Mace, the other thing that Harvey competed in 1981.
Oh, it's obviously ultimate. I mean, it's come up so many times already in the conversation today. But in '81, you were doing demos, like you did the demo at the Rose Bowl uh, between Tom
Oh, the ultimate
Kennedy.
demo. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tom Kennedy led Santa Barbara Condors, and the All Star team featuring yourself, Harold Duvall, and Gary Williams, who later became one of the main handlers of the London-based Horizontal Hombres Ultimate Team,
Mm.
and that was covered by ESPN. So that's pretty neat. Like early on, getting that kind of coverage, that had to be kind of shocking.
Oh yeah, yeah. And just to be able to get out on the Rose Bowl field and run
Yeah.
around. Again, I was pretty much a newbie at that point in time. There was a lot of other higher level ultimate players. Um, I came into my own, relatively speaking, in ultimate because I was never super fast or anything like that. But later in the '80s is when I had more success. Hit a few the national tournaments with a couple different teams. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a great time.
Well, I mean, for those who don't quite understand, the Condors were the team.
Oh,
They were like the Habs of the '70s or the Oilers of the early '80s. They were the
Yankees.
perennial champions. Okay, yes, even better. The Yankees,
Yeah.
the champions. They were the All Stars, and so the All Stars that they formed, and you guys had never played together before. You just they threw the best Japanese ultimate player with the best non Condors West Coast player with the best person from
Yeah.
Florida, put it all together on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And normally the Condors just embarrassed everybody out there, but you guys held your ground. You guys played well.
Did we? Okay.
It was 8-7 for the Condors after the.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, normally ultimate games go higher than that, but still.
Yeah, and
eh,
it depends on whether they brought their first team or who showed up, and everybody's taking it a little casual because it's a demo, and
Oh,
not
well,
super.
it
But
it
yeah,
it did look. If you look at the footage, it looked like there were a couple of points that were scored by the All Stars that got the Condors' attention and woke them up a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. No, there were some good players. JC John Cohn, I think, was on the team. Paul Brenner, which you mentioned earlier. Some guys who were in their prime as ultimate players. Probably Herrick.
And Tim Mackey, who you've
Oh yeah.
also done freestyle with as well.
Yep. Well, I think another one maybe turned 70 this year. Yeah. There's a whole string of us.
That tends to happen at your age.
If you're still alive, there's a lot of guys who turned the same year. Yeah.
So let's just briefly turn our attention to the 1982 World Championships. Just as Mason and I have discovered through this journey of learning about the history of flying disc sports, 82 was the first time that it moved from California to outside of that and then ended up at Rutgers. Um, and no one knew at the time, but this was ultimately the last World Frisbee Championships. And you went from, let's see, you took 15th overall in the '81, your first appearance. '82, you take 5th overall.
I think 5th overall, yeah, and winning
And
MTA.
you also take 5th in golf. And there's some big names
really? Okay.
in terms of golf. If we just run down the golf, Scott Zimmerman wins, Jeff Watson is second, Bill Burns, who just got into the PDGA last year, Sean Sheldon, Tom Kennedy was tied for 5th with you, and
Okay.
Greg Hosfeld,
Yeah.
who's going to win the World Championships 5 years from there. So 85, you're feeling pretty good, aren't you?
Definitely. I could not have remembered. I mean, I obviously remember the overall because that's almost more important sometimes to me, and the self-caught flight victory. But I would not have remembered the 5th place in golf.
Okay. And now this, of course, let us bear in mind, this is before the beveled edge revolution as well.
Yes.
So you're still playing with, even though you have different discs for different of the disciplines, it's all the same frisbee shape. It's not like you're dealing with a putter version or whatever.
Yeah, and I know for one era of that before the beveled edge discs, I frequently was playing with a single disc, 100 mold, Midnight Flyers 100 mold, and I would roll it, I would air it, I would sidearm it, I would do whatever. But there were many tournaments that I played with a single, maybe I may had two or something like that, but a single Honda mold. And then the next year is when the beveled edge came out.
I remember seeing photos of Crazy John with just 3 golf discs, and I was like,
Yeah.
"What is this fool doing?"
Yeah.
And you're coming
Because
from
they
an
were all
era
pretty much
before
the
the above
same.
edge.
I mean, they
Yeah,
were all pretty much the same.
I don't think Crazy, even to this day, still goes beyond 5. I think a lot of times, I think it's a lot of times it's 4, and maybe on occasion it's 5. But
Oh, you see guys with 30 discs in their bag and they throw 3 of them.
yeah,
yeah, I throw
I'm,
stuff in the back seat
yeah,
and go, I'm not throwing this once today, or that,
yeah.
or that, or that.
I'm a little bit of a minimalist, and
I got to
like,
make sure that I have enough for the pond. That's all that
there
I
you
have.
go.
well, there is that. There's
Just carry one that
definitely
floats. Carry one that floats.
there definitely is that. Well, so this, we're kind of getting. Obviously, we started a little bit late, but and we've definitely kind of danced around the subject. But there's something that I really want to talk about tonight, and I think it's it's pivotal and it's key to where you're at, obviously, right now, and that is. In 1987, you were involved in an accident, and it was nearly tragic. But uh, contrary to the rumors in Baltimore, you didn't die,
That's what I
but
was told. Yeah.
you did spend a fair bit of time in the hospital after that accident you were in with Slate Paul and Steve Weiskup in the same car.
Mm-hmm.
And it, as we discussed in our phone call the other day, it really set the stage for right where you're at right now in your life and on the planet and all of that. And so let's talk a little bit about that accident, but then also talk about I guess it's an epiphany, or not necessarily, but kind of the realization, I guess, is a better way of putting it, that maybe it's time for you to look at things a little more seriously. And so talk a little bit about that, because I don't know that too many people are aware of all of
Yeah, I
that.
was living sort of I don't want to say bohemian necessarily, but the on the edge lifestyle of, maybe keeping in a room in an apartment, but doing a lot of demos and shows and some tournaments, obviously, when they could be fit in. And like I said, I was with Dave Jewell doing shows based out of his place in Wisconsin, and traveled to Steve Weiskup's place in Ohio. Got in the car. We went to Slate Paul, picked him up in Ohio. I'm not sure why we were going to Baltimore. I think I mentioned that it was either a golf tournament or maybe an overall tournament. And beautiful day in October, we're traveling through West Virginia. And then I remember about 2 hours before the accident, I was maybe reading a book or something like that. What I was told afterwards is that, you know how you're driving, sometimes you just doing a little looking around, and all of a sudden there's a car. This is what I was told later. There was a car stopped to make a left-hand turn into, it's 2-lane road. So there's a car stopped doing something, waiting for oncoming traffic to make a turn. And Steve was driving. He hits the brakes so we don't run into that car. But ultimately we swerved into oncoming traffic. I'm in the passenger seat. We get broadsided on my right-hand side by an oncoming car. I don't know what happened to that driver. Steve wasn't really injured. Slate wasn't really injured. I was out for the next 3 days, airlifted to West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia Hospital. Like I said, I was told later that the tournament heard that I had been killed in the accident. Hopefully that got cleared up fast. But basically my entire right side, collarbone, ribs, pelvis, punctured lung, bruised heart, bruised kidneys, everything's pretty much smashed up because of being broadsided. The collapsed lung is probably the most serious health risk there. But I wake up about 3 days later in the hospital, and a lot of people, family, had come down. I was told later that when my mother saw me in ICU, she was horrified because I had, glass cuts all from the window, all these pieces of glass just cut up my face like crazy. My mother sees me in ICU and she's horrified, and an ex-girlfriend sees me and she's relieved. So it's, you see the same person. I've seen the pictures too, and it's like, it's a pretty bloody mess. So yeah, that was a long recovery. I did end up playing in the next year's U.S. Open in '88, but not terribly functional because you're nursing a bruised or a fractured pelvis, so you got to recover that from walking, and you got a collarbone and you got all these broken ribs. I had an opportunity years later where my DDC partner ran into my left side and cracked a few ribs there, and I had an X-ray on those ribs, and the X-ray technician in the report commented on, I don't know if he used the word chaos, but something along those lines about the right-hand side of my rib cage. And I remember seeing an X-ray when I was in the hospital. They wheeled me down to X-ray, and you just see snap, 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 snap was the rib cage on the right-hand side. So like we were discussing earlier before this podcast, is that it was like, you're living this life on the road. You're not making a lot of money. It's time to maybe turn things around. So during my recovery, my sister-in-law at the time was hearing someone speak about a graduate school program. And I had been thinking, as I'm recovering, let's enjoyed working with kids. Let's look at teaching. PE, teacher, elementary education. I like younger kids. And I had the opportunity to interview for a graduate school program at Teachers College at Columbia University in New York, and was accepted. And it was a program in special education, becoming a teacher for the visually impaired. And for me, it wasn't necessarily a concern of what my population was, whether it was special education or anything. They're all kids. And that led me to moving to Arizona upon graduation. And then I did eventually, actually, after a couple of years of being a teacher for the visually impaired, went back to the University of Arizona and got a certification in what's called orientation and mobility. So if anybody ever sees somebody with a white cane traveling down the street, they've been taught by an orientation and mobility instructor in the use of that white cane. And ideally, you start with kids when they're really young. If they're congenitally visually impaired, totally blind, whatever, you start early so they get used to using that cane and they get used to using all their tools to find their way around. So that became my career, 1990 Phoenix. And then, 25 years later is when I technically retired. And then 5 years later is when I more or less officially retired. Because in my field of vision impairment and special education, there's a severe shortage. So anybody watching the show who needs a job, become a teacher. Become a teacher in any category, special education particularly, because they just kept begging me to come back and begging me to come back. And finally, when I hit 70, it's like, yeah, okay, well, let's just focus on, playing, traveling. When I moved here in 90, the World Championships, PDGA World Championships, were here in Phoenix in October. Okay, I just moved here, took a new job in August. I'm going to ask for a week off in October. I just didn't feel like I could do that. And then when it was in Flagstaff in 05 or something, it was the first week of school. Couldn't really take that time off. So a couple of years ago, 2023, it was in Flagstaff again. Hey, I can finally play in my home state in the World Championships.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a turning point in life for sure. Just surviving something like that. You're not.
Well, I mean, one of the crazy things that we all think when we're younger is that life is pretty much of a straight road. You don't realize how curved the path of life is until all of a sudden the horizon is completely changed. You go, wait a minute, I'm still heading the straight line. What happened to the North Star? What happened to the sun? What happened to the moon?
And when you get older, you're like, I'm 70 years old. It's like, how exactly did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, and it's along from both of those statements too, that a little left turn or a right turn, whether it's a big one or a small one, that you never know where it's going to lead you. And obviously, it led you through a tough time, but it also led you to your obvious destiny.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why I brought it up, and I really wanted to focus on this because
Yeah.
everybody has a story, and this, like, it just jumped out of our conversation the other day to me that, like, this is key to your whole story. I mean, obviously it led you to missing a lot of world championships slash majors, but at the same time, like the stories you told me earlier this year when I was over at your house in Phoenix about running into some of your students and
Oh
or
yeah.
encountering some of your students and seeing how they're putting the things you taught them to work. That
Yeah. That
I
brings you
can
a
only
lot of
just imagine,
satisfaction.
like, that filled your soul, and then it gave you like three reserves in case your soul ever
Yeah.
drops a little bit, because like there's something about turning on the light, but then turning on the light for somebody that can't see it
Mm.
is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
so my
And
hat's off
and
to you
and
on
like I
that.
said,
That's very
without
impressive.
without the accident, I'm not sure what direction my life would have taken. Um, and certainly with the accident, it put me on this path towards becoming a teacher, and then that path, took me to Phoenix, and a lot of things have happened since then. Who knows where I would have been? I could have ended up a lot of different places in a lot of different careers, and life would have been very different. But I'm pretty thankful that it turned out this way. Life is, I've been through a few. I was telling you I was going to show you that
Yeah. Do you have
injury.
it?
Um,
Did you find
let's
it?
yeah, let's see, where is it? Where do I have it? I'm not sure if I have it in my picture. I have the shirt somewhere close by. Where did I put that? Um, I almost thought I had a picture of it on my phone. Where did I put it?
So what he's looking for, he's told me about this in our conversation the other day. He's got a shirt that has a
Okay,
stick figure person on it,
I'm going to run and get it real quick. Hang on.
and there's red X's everywhere he has an injury or has had an injury or a surgery, and apparently the guy's pretty X'd up. And I don't mean like EX. I mean like,
Yeah.
oh my God, here's another skull and crossbones moment.
Well, I mean, it's interesting how the high tempo. Some of the flying disc sports have such a high tempo pace to it, and kind of a higher beats per minute in the heartbeat, and so like ultimate appeals to that type of person, and they're moving fast. They're playing discathon. They're doing things that are moving fast. But then when you go to the slow speed,
Okay, I have it packed for my trip. So let's see. So this is a stick figure, and every little red X is
Crime
either
scene
an
figure.
injury
that's where boo boo.
or a surgery.
Okay.
The little things where my eyes are that's just cataract surgery. That was elective. But a lot of other things, like there's a
Wait,
torn quad
it
muscle,
that's
knee
you?
replacement.
Those are all
That's
your.
Yeah, broken arms.
That's
Broke
awesome.
both my arms. Had surgery on both shoulders. Broken
Jeez.
ribs. Fractured
One
pelvis.
broken rib X goes a long way, though.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It was
You've
pretty
only
much.
got two X's, but you said multiple ribs on both sides.
It
So,
was pretty much 2 ribs on the left side and pretty much every rib on the right side in the car accident.
Now,
man,
before we wrap up here, I just want to note when it comes to discathon, and this comes from
Mm.
Doug Corns and his Freestyle Players Association page. He says Harvey Brandt became famous by winning the discathon event every year for the 10 years he was a grandmaster. So you probably had about 90% of those red glowing X's on your actual body each year that you were winning the discathon event.
For a
Uh,
lot of them, yeah, yeah.
and discathon is not for the faint of heart. I mean, for people who are wondering what the heck is, they understand what DDC may be, or they understand what these other things. Discathon is kind of a bit of a different stepchild of the flying disc sports. It combines and one would think marathon, but it's not. It's more sprint running over a short course, but also throwing.
Kilometer long.
But I mean, you're still
Yeah.
running fast
Oh
bursts,
yeah.
and you're throwing frisbees. It's a weird combination, and you are one of the best at that too. You and Leonard Muse and Conrad
Mm-hmm.
Damon,
Mm-hmm.
kind
And a
of
couple
the
guys out of Europe. A couple guys out of
okay.
Europe.
So
Sune Wenzel out of Norway, and Carlos Rio out of Norway as well. Yeah.
okay, it's discathon is one of those things that is. It seems like it's been preserved in the whiff diff annals in Europe primarily. I don't know. Is it much
It
other than
happens
Leonard
at
Muse?
the U.S. Open overall and the WIFDIF overalls. It still happens, but not at too many state overall tournaments. It takes a lot of time to set up the obstacle course. It's a kilometer long with about 25 to 30 directional arrows that you have to throw your disc around, and it's not a golf disc. It's non-beveled edge plastic.
Right.
Zephyrs or Ultimate discs, and you have to throw rollers around the tree this way or around the tree that way or through a Y in the tree, and it's an obstacle course sprinting, and you miss, just like in golf, you miss a mando, you got to go back and unwind, or in
Oh
discathon you got
wow.
to go back and unwind if you miss it strong, like you throw a roller and it goes 30 yards past the mando and you missed it, you got to come back and still do it. So it's a
And
race, and it's pretty exciting.
but
But
this
yeah,
is
I've had
something
a
that
fair amount of success with that.
so Mason and I were just talking when you just stepped off there to go grab the T-shirt, was that discathon is really kind of like ultimate, one of the few of the high kinetic, high tempo
Mm.
disc sports that involves a lot of that running. And I remember seeing some of the disc golfers like Mike Randolph, who we're going to have on next week,
Oh yeah, yeah.
was got very famous by you know doing speed runs through the course and
Oh
combining his
yeah.
time with his score.
That
And I
was my
thought,
training.
what
Yeah.
are you, some kind of fool? But there is a thing about this. It's just not enough people know about this high tempo, high kinetic, high cardio action frisbee side that we
Some of my better rounds have been running through the course,
have.
with three
That's so.
discs, maybe not even a putter, but three discs.
That's
Oh
amazing.
wow.
That
Yeah, I've
is
mentioned this before, but I remember hearing people talk about Conrad Damon doing De La Viega 27 holes in 27 minutes, and I'm just
Something like
like,
that. Yeah. Yeah. He's an animal.
crazy. Yeah.
wow. Like, how do you keep him out of the valleys? That's my question.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, like, there's got to have been a couple of holes that he played in less than a minute because there had to have been a couple where he had to go down and have a look.
Mm-hmm. That's a brutal course.
Well, listen, Harvey, we've taken up a lot of your time already, and we can't thank you enough for being such a graceful and amazing host or guest with us. Thanks for all the stories you've told. Thanks for just
Certainly.
being who you are and participating and creating the our current contemporaneous living history of flying disc sports. People like you, if we can see further, it's because we're standing on the shoulders of you giants. That's all.
All right. I appreciate it. And nice words to prop me up for the upcoming 2 weekends of events. So this podcast, was this live tonight, or it's just going to be posted later?
It was live. There's been three people that stopped by, but it will be posted on the Good Times
Cool.
Hour page, and it'll also be posted on maceman.com on the Good Times Hour page there as well. And then
Maceman.com. Cool.
it'll also be available audio only on Spotify and Apple Music in the next few days as well.
Isn't
So we're trying.
technology amazing?
Well, we're still figuring it out, and there's certainly some folks that'll point that out, but it's it's definitely, well, like I was talking to you when we spoke the other day. Paul and I got into this thinking that we were relatively strong experts in disc golf, and we've also found some holes in our game in that way. But we had this huge, giant, gaping hole where it came to frisbee and all the overall stuff, and we've had a really good time this year being educated by you and a lot of your peers, and so that's thanks a lot for spending time with us. And
Oh,
you know
definitely.
what I mean, even earlier this year when I was there at your house with you and Mark Horn, and like I just left with such a big bucket full of information, and it was a great time. And this was also, these last two conversations were great as well. So look forward to seeing you in hopefully in January. You certainly will see my trophies. I'm not sure how I'm going to pull that early date off. I may just have to fly in for the last couple days of the
Yeah, it's a
event.
little different just because of them tearing up the course and doing reconstruction that we have to change the date. So, unfortunately, but as long as people know about it ahead of time, it should still work for us. And then, like I said, late April, Virginia State overalls. Um,
It's
look
on my
forward to
list.
that possibility.
I'm
Nice.
definitely thinking about that last weekend.
It's a lot of fun. Great people. You just come to the park and you stay there all day long.
That's amazing.
Never have to go out for food. Everything's right there.
Yeah, it's every time I hear more about it, I'm more and more interested in. Obviously, like I just I vaguely remember participating in maybe 2 or 3 events that had overalls, and at
Hmm.
that point, it was kind of on the way out. I hate to say it, but it was real easy to not participate.
Yeah.
Because it was like
Yeah.
I just went there to golf. I don't need to play these other games.
Yeah.
And now I really feel like I missed out even more than I ever did back then. And so I'm definitely looking forward to witnessing some of these games I've never seen, and eventually probably do some playing, but at a not at a great level. But whatever. Who cares? It's all about
Yeah,
fun, right?
exactly. Everybody just plays.
Absolutely. Well, you continue to keep spreading the light, keep spreading the love, and keep them flying high, my friend. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for
Oh, thank you
stopping by and chatting
for
with
inviting
us.
me.
My pleasure. And we'll see you hopefully down the road at some point.
I'll be here.
Hey, good luck on these next 2 events.
Hey,
I really
thank
wish I
you.
could make the Selinsky this year, but I've just got back from North Carolina and Kansas, and I've got to do a
Yeah.
little bit of work before I go
It'll
back.
be my first time at the Selinsky, unfortunately, because it was always in time with school year. It was hard to take the time. But Tim was a great friend of mine, and you know, really miss him. And it's nice to be able to get to his tournament that he started basically, and now named for him. It'll be my first time, but really looking forward to it.
Nice.
Well, have
Right
a
on.
great time and good luck to you. I'm
Absolutely.
sure that there's a lot of 70-year-olds that are shaking in their shoes right now.
They're coming after me.
All right.
They're
Thanks,
definitely
Harvey.
coming after you. You've put a big
Definitely,
target on your back for sure.
definitely. All right,
All right, Harvey.
gentlemen.
Well, thanks a lot for stopping by, and look forward to running into you in person again soon.
All right. Good
Thank you.
night from Phoenix.
Nice.
Have a good evening, everybody.
You bet.